Hello, everybody, and welcome to Blue Star Rising, Templar Awakening. I'm Michael Henry Dunn, and with my co-host, Reverend Maia Nartoomid, we are glad to have you with us. The subject today is so deep and so amazingly rich. It doesn't go back 12,000 years. It actually goes back a lot further than that, which is the Templar stream of sacred activism in the service of the ascension of human consciousness and human sovereignty and freedom. And this is an area that I've had quite a lot of learning with, and that Maia is able to bring in a whole other stream of esoteric awareness and material that she's received over the years from the Thothic stream, as she identifies her very rich, intimate stream of sacred science that comes to her through her inner planes mentor. So I'd like to begin just by sharing that I have become part of a movement to restore and revive as best I can with those friends and compatriots who have worked with me for a revival of the spirit of chivalry, and more especially of the authentic, true Templar stream as it came down, not merely through the legendary medieval order of the Knights Templar, but their antecedents with the Sufi order, before that through the Essenes, before that to Pharaonic Egypt, and before that back into the mists of time with Lord Melchizedek, and going back as far as Atlantis and Lemuria. So we're going to have a little bit different format, more of a back and forth between Maia and I on this particular topic, because Maia is very much a part of the Johannine Templar order, a spiritual leader within that order here in Colorado. So Maia, would you like to comment at all on how you first, how the name Templar first came into your work, as a spiritual counselor and in working with Thoth? I know it was not a primary focus, and then it began to emerge more and more at a certain point. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. I can't remember exactly when it first came in, but it was like probably in the late 1970s when Thoth would drop that word here and there. Something of the. Sometimes he'd say the Templaric Earth. That was what I think. That's how he started using it, Templaric Earth. And then every once in a while he would say the Templar this or that, and he wasn't speaking of the order. He was speaking of things far more ancient than that, but he never explained. It was just like, a word that he used. And it wasn't until, as I recall, until about 1982 or 3, something like that, early 1980s anyway, when he spoke about the son of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, but he calls it Mari, Mary Magdalene. And, his take on this in the timeline that we are activating, Yeshua and Mary did not conceive a child or didn't have any kind of relations to do so until after his death and resurrection, which wasn't a real death, of course, but again, Thoth veers away from the Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and more popular themes, that he didn't really die, and he faked his death, so to speak, and Mary and him went off into the sunset and had a bunch of kids. Well, that may be another timeline. I don't know. He's kind of inferred that there could be a lot of different timelines connected to that. But the one that he's promoting, let's say, is that Yeshua went through the transformation in the tomb. That was extremely important. To miss that would have been, it was a keynote of the entire path of the earth and its evolutionary process at that stage. And so it was so important that he accomplished that, which he did. So after that point, when Mary went to Iona, and this would have been maybe a year or two after his transformation, he came to her there, and they conceived one child. And I imagine they did it in some sort of a way that that's not exactly what we think of. Oh, I think it was some other way. Not that I have anything against that, but I mean, I just think it was some kind of a light engendered process. Anyway, so then that young boy, whose name was John Martinus, and she named him that. I don't know why she named him John, but Martinus, she named him Martinus because the man, I guess you could call him an early Templar, again, not of an official order, that escorted her to Iona. And she went other places first. I think she went into France, southern France first for a brief time. She would return. She would return there for a longer period, but then she went into Iona. And he escorted her there. And they were not, partners or anything, but they were, very, very close. And so she named her child, gave his last name as that. So it was John Martinus. Anyway, so that was when I received that information, it was then that Thoth had said to me, John Martinus was the first Templar. And I was puzzled because I knew it was way too early for Templars. And I knew he'd mentioned that word before, but now he's saying that the son of Yeshua and Mary, the only child they would have, was a first Templar. And so I asked him about that, and he said that the true Templar stream went back as far as Lemuria, actually. And later he would tell me about how Melchizedek, and we covered this on another show, so I won't go in a lot of detail, but Lord Melchizedek came from Venus and established the heaven houses, and that was the first Grail family, so to speak. And out of that family would arise the family of Jesus and John Martinus and all of that. So, but he called John Martinus the first Templar because it was through him that some kind of acknowledgement and order would take place. When I say order, not with a capital O, but an orderliness of the doctrine that would later become the true core doctrine of the actual order of the Templars. So because John Martinus collected it, brought it together, and was consciously aware of what he was doing, that's why Thoth called him the first Templar.
I see. Well, that aligns with, the stream that first drew me to the Templar work. Because I was raised Catholic, and I had a good experience as a Catholic in my childhood, and my mother also gave me, when I was about 10 years old or so, the original, tales of King Arthur and his knights. And so the legend of the Grail and the Holy Quest and Lady Fair and the Round Table and all that went deep for me as a boy. And then because I was trained in the theater, and early on, Man of La Mancha, Don Quixote was, I played that in my teen years, and subsequently did, productions of Camelot and did a lot of Shakespeare. that these went deep. These are part of me. And when I hear you describe this stream, it aligns for me with the essentials of the code of chivalry on a high and deep level in terms of the whole arc of human history. Because, of course, the code of chivalry did not just come into being with the Arthurian tales or with the beginning of the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ of the Temple of Solomon, as the Templars were first known when they began in Jerusalem in 1118 AD, that the code of chivalry is essentially just the highest universal values of humanity. It's the golden rule taken into its full conclusions and corollaries, and to preserve sacred knowledge, to uphold justice, to defend those who cannot defend themselves, and to commune directly with spirit in order to purify one's own life as much as possible. These are the core elements of what I would call sacred activism, which is a term coined by Andrew Harvey, who's a wonderful scholar and poet and thinker and visionary mystic. And so I just want to share a little bit with everyone the story of how I came to be involved in an attempt to lineally restore the original order of the Knights Templar, the original medieval order, and where that came from and what became of it, and where I see it happening now. I was working for my spiritual community in the publishing wing, and began to follow what was happening with a rumored reset of the global currency system. There were rumors and a lot of stuff going on online about the supposed coming demise of the fiat currency system, where you just, the financial elite just prints money. The Fed says, oh, we need some quantum easing, and they print trillions of dollars out of nothing, and it's backed by nothing, and eventually collapses into nothing, is what's happened with fiat currency systems throughout history. And that supposedly there's a growing movement to replace that system with a currency reset to an asset-backed system. And hey, if you buy some Iraqi dinar for $60, if you buy it before Monday, because Monday there's going to be the reset, and it's going to be your $60 worth of dinar are going to be worth like $500,000, because the dinar is at a tenth of a penny. Before the war, Saddam had it at $3.42, and the Bushes had this whole scam, and it's a story that probably a lot of you have heard of. And as my research into that progressed, it goes down a rabbit hole, and you find out more about the central banking system, the families behind it, the history of it, the origin of the Federal Reserve. And this was when a lot was coming out with David Wilcock and through, Carrie Cassidy and Benjamin Fulford and various other alternative journalism sites about the global collateral accounts. And David Wilcock did a whole series called Financial Tyranny, confirmed the $1 trillion lawsuit, to overturn financial tyranny. And that was my introduction to a man named Neil F. Keenan, who was spearheading the effort to essentially free the trillions of dollars in assets secreted in various bunkers and tunnels throughout Indonesia and elsewhere in Southeast Asia by the Japanese after World War II, which were afterwards positioned to be the underpinning collateral of the global financial system, with the founding of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, and etc. As you can see, I've been down that rabbit hole because I can still recite it just like that. But and that led to my working with Mr. Keenan and going to Indonesia, essentially being my official title, my director of communications for the Keenan Group. And essentially it was freelance journalism covering something that mattered to me, very much. And it was an amazing opportunity to go there. I took enormous risks. I ended up losing my job, my savings, and my girlfriend at that time over the whole thing. But it was, my dharma, right? I was called to do this, and I became friends with Neil, and we, did a lot of work together. And I wrote a lot of pretty well received, widely distributed columns from Jakarta, Indonesia, covering his work. And that led at a certain point. There was a $1 trillion lawsuit that was filed by Mr. Keenan against various entities that we would identify as the cabal. High-profile personages from, the various officials with the Federal Reserve and associated families, political and royal figures. Let's just leave it at that. And that this was filed in federal district court in New York, and was later withdrawn because it was looking for another jurisdiction where it might actually have a chance of being heard. And more evidence was coming to the table. And when I went to Indonesia, it was like, we're about to roll it out. The global collateral account assets are about to come online and be available. This is the moment at which the question of an international court of human rights to uphold the rule of law so that the crimes associated with the abuse and fraud of the global collateral accounts, which were supposed to benefit humanity, they were supposed to rebuild. And the International Human Rights Court movement began at that time when I was introduced to a man named Matthew, who was an international lawyer, American-born, who had Russian heritage and had gone to Russia near the end of the Yeltsin regime and had worked with the Putin administration on cleaning up the Russian mafia chaos that had been allowed to flourish under Boris Yeltsin. And this was back when the US had good relations with Russia, with the Russian Federation, in the wake of the breakup of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. So he was working with Neil Keenan, and the possibility arose of, could an International Court of Human Rights actually emerge that would uphold the rule of law, that would help us defend those who cannot defend themselves, that would help us take down the elite pedophilia rings, that would help us expose the extortion and blackmail that those rings are used for, apart from other very dark purposes, in order to control politicians and leaders around the world. Was there actually a loophole in various international agreements, international laws, that would allow for the creation of a court that would have enforceability and jurisdiction internationally recognized? This is obviously a huge undertaking. And yet it seemed, as we looked at the limitations of the existing courts, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, that these are set up essentially by the powers that be in order to make sure that they don't get interfered with. So that began my involvement with what I soon learned was the attempt to lineally restore the original order of the Knights Templar. And I worked intimately with Matthew, who had been elected the first Grand Master of the Restored Order for the next 5 years, on bringing forward the lineally restored order and especially establishing the International Human Rights Court, which was then known as the Sovereign Court of International Justice, SCIJ. And we recognized this is a 10 to 20 year undertaking at best, that it was a raid against very formidable forces who would try to prevent it, that we were under-resourced, but we knew we had the know-how, the resources, and we felt the spiritual guidance. And so the effort to restore the Templars wasn't just about all the things you have to do in terms of canon law, customary international law, chivalric protocol, lineal restoration, doctrinal restoration, etc., etc. But of course, more to the point, totally to the point, is what about the Spirit? What about Mary Magdalene, the divine feminine? What about the integration of masculine and feminine within us? What about the Templar use of the grids of our Mother Earth to anchor spiritual community in these sacred energies to help uplift humanity? I mean, to me, that was the juice. That was what it was all about. And ultimately, that led me to come to Crestone, Colorado. And I knew that if we continued to just play on the Cabal's turf, that we were going to be thwarted, taken down, discredited, because we're out-resourced and outgunned and outmanned and out-intelligenced in terms of, surveillance and all the rest of it. And that if we allied ourselves, as I like to think of it, if you want to ally yourself with that which is ever undefeated, which is God, non nobis Domine sed nomine tuo la gloriam, not unto us, O Lord, to thy name be the glory. So if we really didn't just talk about, but actually communed as best we could directly with Spirit in daily meditation and in learning and studying these high sacred arts, the high sacred sciences. And I was drawn through various very fortuitous, synchronicitous circumstances to come to Crestone, Colorado in the fall of 2015, where I met Reverend William Bueller and Dame Edie Cooper. They became knight and dame of the Restored Order at that point and founded a priory in Colorado, which was the Priory of the Ark of Ascension. And Reverend William Bueller, who passed away in August of 2018, was just a remarkable man, former U.S. Navy commander, and probably the greatest living authority on the Reshel system of the grids of Gaia and how they can be utilized to further the ascension of human consciousness. So, and that is ultimately what led to my meeting Reverend Maia, whose work was the inspiration for Bill Bueller's Reshel work and his Synergy Light groups that he developed over the years. And so what I'd like to ask you to do, Maia, is just to share with us that meeting. I know it goes back, it's more than just a single meeting between you and Bill, but how that connected for Bill, because Bill had a very deep connection to the Templars, to their history. You couldn't sing Non Nobis Domine. You can sing the first few notes of the Templar chant, Non Nobis Domine, around Bill without him tearing up. And this is a tough U.S. Navy commander. And, he had a past life in a leadership position in the founding of the Templars. So I'd like you to just share with us, if you would, Maia, how that came about for the Reshel work, working with the grids, and how you first came to know Bill and gave him that thread, which he then followed up and turned into this amazing lifelong work.
Okay, well, briefly, I need to go a little bit further back to say how I actually met Bill, and that was my mother and I we moved to Oahu in 1974, 5 or 6. I can't quite remember. And it was on a spiritual mission. And we didn't know how long we'd stay. We wound up staying about 6 months. Anyway, there we were. And not long after moving there, we kind of wanted to find some other spiritual people out there. Again, no internet, no Googling, you can't find people unless you look them up in the phone book or something. And I've forgotten who told us about the spiritual center. So we contacted it. They said, well, come on down, so we did. And the Patricia Deagle, who was the head of it, we've fondly referred to her as the Dragon Lady because she was so formidable, not in a bad way, just in a very powerful way. And she was, at the time, I would say she's maybe in her early 60s or something. And she had the most incredible, I just have to tell this, she had the most incredible forehead. It came out like this because she was so interdimensional that, her brain just kept growing. And so you've been sitting there in the room, you're trying not to look at her forehead, but it was like, wow, she didn't look strange really, but it was just, it was so powerful. Anyway, so Patricia said, oh, well, I have someone I'd like you to meet, to my mother and I. And it was Bill. And he was, sort of the second in command, shall we say, at that particular fortress of this spiritual place. And he loved to tell the story. So I will say it just briefly for him, because if he was sitting here, he would tell it, because he always did. And that is, he would say, well, Patricia told me, she says, I have this cute little redhead you just got to meet. And she didn't mean it. I mean, he was happily married then and everything, but he that's just the way she put it. I was redhead then. And so we met, and it was like the energies of what we had to share, were just so synchronous. It was amazing. And so my mother and I would go visit him and his wife, Joan, and they had 3 little boys then. They still do. And so we go to their home, and Bill and I would just get in a set to, we would just sit there and just talk, and my mother and Joan would just have to go sit there and watch, because we were so involved in what we were talking about. So that's the way it began. And then I had to, we left the islands, and but I continued to be in contact with William and Joan off and on, but not in a continuous way. Things happen, with life changes and whatever. But then that would have been 76. So we left about, just before 77, 78. 79. So it was about 82, maybe. We started really connecting again. And I can't remember exactly what prompted that, but our connections had to be over telephone and letters. And so, and mostly really over telephone at the time. So one morning, I woke up and I saw I saw it in my mind, but it was like it was on my chest. It was a symbol. It was a half moon, but not this way. It was this way. And I've forgotten what else was in it. And I heard Rochelle. And I was told, I asked those, well, what is this? And he just simply said something to the effect that it was a key or a core sacred pattern of systems operation, you might call it, in the universe. It was like it plugged in to all different fields of operation to bring spirit to matter conjuncto. So I thought, that's pretty cool. So about a day later, I was talking to Bill on the phone about something. I said, oh, by the way, Bill, and I shared this with him. He just went, ah! It was like, he said, what, tell me again. And I did. And he said, oh my God. He said, that's he started calling it Rachel rather than Rochelle. And it's fine, either way is fine. And he said, it's the head, and he started talking about all the dynamics, because whatever I told him, and I don't remember, it was that long ago, about what Thoth had told me, it just clicked. Because you see, Bill had been doing, since he retired as the Navy commander, in Hawaii. And when he was working at that not working, but present in that spiritual center, he was doing this really already grassroots synergic work with people, called it synergy, where people would gather together and they would synergetically connect on inner planes and see diagrams and systems, and they would create systems together, by intentional experience. It was really incredible. He was already starting to do that work. So then by the time he contacted me again, and he actually came to visit my mother and I once, when we were in San Antonio. So he would have been by then, I guess, in Maine. Wasn't he in Maine, Michigan, somewhere? Michigan? Yeah. And so anyway, when I told him this, he just really flipped over it. Okay, so I said, well, about 2 or 3 weeks later, or maybe it was a month later, I came across this book. I wish I had it. I should have brought it in here. I have it. It's called Genesis, not Genesis, but Gen-Isis, like ISIS, And it was a book that contained all kinds of sacred geometry and very strong connecting to Rennes-le-Château, which was a place he was already looking into in regard to symbology and science, sacred geometry and all of that. So I told him about this book, and I said, Bill, this book is really good. I said it connects to so much that Thoth was saying, about many things, but most especially about the Rochelle. In fact, she's practically sitting on a Rochelle, the picture on the book. And so he said, I'll try to find it. Again, can't go to Amazon.com. So he went to his little town, and lo and behold, he went in the bookstore, and there it was. I guess it was a bestseller at the time. So he picks up this book, and he has apoplexy, I guess that's what you'd call it. He's going, like this, and he nearly fell over. He said the room was spinning. He felt he couldn't breathe. He thought he was having a heart attack. And everybody in the place thought he was having a heart attack. And they were like, oh, my God, And they guided him over to a chair and sat him down in the chair. And Bill was just like, he was just like this. He couldn't even talk. And they said, should we call the ambulance, And he said, no. Finally, he started breathing. He got himself back in the body. See, that was what's happened. He just literally was starting to leave the body. And he's still holding the book. He hadn't turned it loose, but he hadn't even opened it. And he opened it, and then he went, So he bought the book. He staggered out of the store, and he went home, and he called me. And that at that point, it's not like the book was everything. It had a lot of really powerful keynotes in it for Bill. But I mean, when he just saw those keynotes, he just took it and just went ballistic, with his own stuff. So that was what really, really started the whole show right there. And then he could think of nothing else, do nothing else. That was it. That was his life right there at that moment. The synergy groups had started him all off, and he was doing great work with it and everything, but it wasn't it, And when he got that Rochelle in his hands, he continued synergy, of course, but with that as the core message. And it continued until his passing, just nearly 2 years ago.
Yes, and he did such amazing work with that system, not only in terms of using it to to work with the grids for specific intentions, and in the synergy light groups, of course, to be open to inner planes agencies that would guide the work. It's not like we've got our own little human agenda down here. We think we figured out what's best. Let's do this, which is fine. We can do that, but those groups are very much about let's let the inner planes agencies who are aware of the bigger picture bring down to boots on the ground, anchoring,
yes,
through us being open to it, what wants to manifest here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also, seeing the patterns and link-ups of the grids, going through Rennes-le-Château, going through Notre Dame, Chartres, Mont Saint-Michel, Stonehenge, and interestingly enough, also through the monastery at Clairvaux in France, which was where Bill had spent an incarnation as Bernard de Clairvaux. I wouldn't share that if he were here, but he's left us. So
well, and he didn't claim that. He didn't claim that. I received that, and when I did, he embraced it. Because he believed in my work. But You know, I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
wanted
and for me, past life stories are stories.
to,
And unless I have, a visceral, unignorable, you know, past life memory, which I've never had. So naturally, I've been, fascinated with the subject. And what I've come down to with it is, okay, so what someone's telling me about a past life, is this a useful story for me now? Does it align with what I already know about myself, my heart's desire, my dharma, my purpose? And can I identify with this story of this soul in this other incarnation such that, like a good movie you've seen or
yeah,
a wonderful novel, identifying with, there are figures in history that I identify with. Doesn't mean I think I was them. But that said, the idea that Reverend William Bueller had been, in a past life, Saint Bernard de Clairvaux, who was like a doctor of the church after his death, meaning one of the great Christian teachers, Catholic teachers of all time. There's only a handful designated by the church. And the founding patron, ecclesiastical patron of the Knights Templar.
may I interject for a
Yes,
moment?
please.
Um, when I received this about Clairvaux, this was back in like 1991 or 92. So no real Templar thing was in my mind. Of course, I'd already received about John Martinus. And then when I was in Austin, Thoth requested that I call our little group the Isis Templars. I thought, okay. But, I just took it with a grain of salt. I didn't figure out why or anything. So I wasn't Templar oriented when I received this, nor did I know a lot about this Clairvaux fellow. I received this. I Googled it for 5 seconds because I don't know if it was Google, but there was some kind of search engine. I saw a picture and I got his name, and then I told Bill, and that was about it. So I didn't know the real history of this fellow. There was no Templar stuff going on in my life or his life at the time, directly. So I just wanted to say that was happened a long, long time ago.
Okay.
Then
Yeah,
everything came forward. Now it was like, oh my gosh, it sort of fit in.
well, that's great because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That you didn't know of Bernard de Clairvaux's history. I mean, he was a great mystic. He was a great devotee of the Blessed Mother, and he helped convince the initial Templars that yes, an order of warrior monks was appropriate, and that they could live according to monastic rule as warriors for Christ in the context of the Crusades going on at that time. And of course there were many terrible things that were done in the name of the Crusades, and the original temple rule of the Templars, which was guided by Bernard in the writing of that original temple rule. It starts out by saying that the original Christian occupiers of Jerusalem did not uphold chivalry, did not act as true soldiers of Christ, and that this order was instituted partly to correct and uplift that. And of course, the Templars were just human beings, and there were good Templars and bad Templars and rogue Templars and greedy Templars and all the rest of it. But the core,
Templars, yeah.
yeah, the core, it was a very sacred commitment.
Yeah.
And there were these inner sacred sciences that were understood and practiced. And there is, of course, the strong tradition of an understanding of sacred union between Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. Not all Templars believed there was a child. Not all Templars believed that there was this bloodline they were supposed to protect. It's really about a paragenetic lineage, meaning a soul lineage, in my mind, is what it's really about in terms of upholding the core values and code that came out in the Templar order that were really, as I say, the highest universal values of humanity that manifested in many other times and places and cultures.
When
Go
you're
ahead,
saying
Maya.
that, I'm getting a little feed from Thoth here about how the paragenetics, which is a term that he gave to me back in the 1974 or something, meaning that there's their basic genetics. My offspring inherit from me, and they goes down the line. But then paragenetics is bringing in not only traits and paths of your life from other lives, but it's also bringing it in from the spiritual directives that you have in other lifetimes that come into your cellular being when you incarnate, and that when in doing that you can pass this along even without even having any offspring, because literally once you incarnate, it's like a resonant signal, and it goes up the line and down the line. Even if you don't have any children like me, I've seeded my grandparents and ancestors, and I've also seeded future generations that come out of other parts of my bloodline. I have cousins who have cousins and are going to have cousins, and that sort of thing. So it goes through that whole span. So why I'm saying that is because Thoth is saying now that with John Martinus, when he incarnated, and again, I need to say that the soul of John Martinus was Thoth. It's the same soul. And when John Martinus incarnated in that body as John Martinus, he brought with him the familial lineages, paragenetically, of the whole 9 sun spirits that Thoth embodies his link to. He's one of the 9 sun spirits, and Yeshua is one of the 9 sun spirits. So even so, though some of those sun spirits haven't incarnated, they have seeded paragenetically those lineages on the planet. This is where the Grail families receive their grist for the mill. It's coming out of the sun spirits, and the sun spirits are the solar emanations. They're souls that carry and stream solar emanations from the heart of our solar being, not just our sun, that too, but it goes beyond that. It's the solar being. So what he's saying now, let me corral it again, is that John Martinus then he inherited through the paragenetic stream that had to come together with Yeshua and Mari through a very specific insemination that was different from normal. These energies came together in him, not in Yeshua. Yeshua carried incredible stuff, but the lineages were intended for the son of the sun. And so he was the one that had these lineages and sent them forth. And that's why, I'm just not getting this, so I'm excited about it. That's why he's the first Templar, more than any other reason, right there.
Oh, wow. Okay, let me see if I understand this correctly. So he brought with him in his paragenetic incarnation the sort of seed codes of all 9 sun spirits, and that these flowed out through him, not only through his own bloodline lineage that descended through him, but also out into the field, as
yes.
it were. Yeah, that's quite fascinating to me. And I've thought about how, like, for example, in the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship, which has been my spiritual community for many years, at the moment of conception, he teaches that there is a flash in the ether at the moment of conception, and many souls desiring incarnation move to that flash, seeking to be born, because a human body is a precious incarnation. And that only one soul, for whatever reason, wins through to occupy that fertilized egg. And that what then happens is, there's genetics, there's heredity, there's the genes of the man and woman who came together. But when that soul occupies and wins the struggle to incarnate into that new human being, that developing fetus, that the genetic heritage blends with the astral genetics that are locked in the astral spine of each of us has an astral spine. That when we leave the body, that's our astral body, and then there's the causal body of ideas, and that the body and our personality and all the genetic traits, yes, they develop from our hereditary genetics, but they also very much develop from the seeds of karma that are embedded in the astral spine, and that this paragenetic heritage very much determines who we are in this human incarnation or human characteristics. And what you're describing expands on that, in my understanding, that we not only bring our whole cause and effect, multifarious influences and habits and thought patterns and karma and virtues and everything in our astral spine, but that we bring that into a larger field. And especially, it sounds like as if if we're on a spiritual path and we're evolving upwardly, that it carries on in a blessing kind of way, both forward and backward. Grandparents and grandchildren and aunts and uncles and cousins. And
yes, it does. It goes both directions. And if everybody is doing that down the line, it becomes this seamless stream.
Yeah.
But the reason it's not perfect on this planet is because if you look at a segment of DNA, how they can show it on a little graph and you see these little slices and that's the DNA, if you look at that, if you had a slice of DNA that had some real problems and imperfections, things that scientists can spot right away. Oh, well, you see right here, this is, you could take a slice of DNA, and if you turned it into light, which, scientists can't do, but it could be done, you turned it into a light graph, then you would see where there were fine breaks in it. And those breaks are where humanity has, when they've brought their paragenetic finer frequencies in, what if they don't have a lot of finer frequencies? And, some souls are so lost on this particular earth at this time. They're all God-based, they're all children of God, equally so. But in incarnations, they've gotten lost a lot, and those souls, that wind up to be, I don't know, serial killers and whatever, and even less than that, those that just are really, really lost in other ways, they have a lot of breaks in that line. So what happens is, even though paragenetics only brings through the highest qualities, if there's a broken field, they've got a little strand here that's trying to get in, a little strand here, but there's a lot of blank space, then it creates sort of a discontinuance of that streaming in the family. So what happens is, then you get a family line that's kind of wonky. Grandpa got arrested for this and his son was, doing drugs over here. And you think, oh, well, this is environment and whatever. But you see, they draw the environment to them to play out the brokenness because they're trying to find the path back. So then you have a soul that is asked, I don't know how this works. They say, hey, would you do this or whatever? I don't know how it happens because I don't know why would they even volunteer, but I guess they're just highly spiritual beings and they do. They volunteer or whatever. They come into a specific family line that's really broken in some way. And maybe they're not all a bunch of thieves, but they have some broken energies there that needs to be fixed, So they bring in a really strong stream into that frequency. And it goes, and it just seals it. It doesn't make it perfect, but it does when you keep doing it. So how many people have come in to it? Have you heard in these modern times, they say, I don't know why I was born into this family. I have nothing in common with them. They don't believe in anything spiritual. Here I am receiving visions and doing all this work, and they're just, down on the ground, and they're just totally clueless, and maybe they're not even, completely integrous. Why was I born into this family? But that's the reason. I mean, there could be other sub reasons, you know, but that's the core reason right there. They're healing, they're mending that line.
Yeah, I heard a story from a healer friend of mine. He and his partner do a thought form healing, and they happened to go to France, and they were invited to visit the cottage. And this is, you know, in Provence, and, you know, beautiful lavender fields and this gorgeous countryside and this very sweet traditional French cottage. And there's this family, and the man in the family, somewhat older, was studying with a shaman in North America, you know, some kind of tribal medicine healer. And so they're sitting there at this nice table with beautiful produce and, you know, bread and cheese and wine, and and the man is talking with them, he and his wife, and then up in the upstairs room they can see that their teenage son is playing the guitar, but very loudly and discordantly. And it's like, oh well, the son's a little disturbed, but, you know, we'll just carry on. The son, you know, was having some emotional issues. And the father was about to undergo surgery for some kind of growth on his back and to do with his spine. And it was going to be very delicate, and he was very much worried about it. And it only came up because Ivor, my friend who was there, said, I'm seeing a dark spot on your spine. What's going on? He said, well, I'm about to get an operation tomorrow. I have this terrible, you know, thing on my spine. If I don't get it fixed, it could disable me. And so there's this whole thing going on. And as Ivor said this, I think the trigger was, he said something like, oh, and does that have anything to do with your son? And suddenly, upon the word that he says this, the son up the stairs with his guitar suddenly freaks out, starts screaming, comes running down the stairs, and as attacking the father. I mean, I don't know, hitting him with the guitar or something, trying to kill his father right in front of them. They're just having a lovely time. And, oh, you've got something on your back. And what's that dark spot I'm seeing clairvoyantly on your back? Oh, I'm going to have this surgery. And then, down comes the son. And he's chasing the father around, trying to kill his father. And they're running around the room, trying to prevent him. And then, you know, then he runs outside, and they're running after him. And he runs off into a shed, and the son is trying to kill him. They get the son away. And then the father hides in a shed, and he's sobbing on the floor of this shed. And my friends came out to him, and you know, the man's wife was pleading with him, no, come out. These are the healers that the shaman told you would come. This is the moment when we can do this. And so with him sobbing on the mud on the other side of this shed door, they took him through this thought form healing protocol that they do, invoking spirits protection and looking at, okay, what's the soul history here? What's going on? Well, it turns out that he and his son had been reincarnating in that family on that land for 400 years.
Wow.
Because I forget which one of them did it first. One of them stabbed him in the back and murdered his father 400 years ago on that land. And they had been reincarnating on that land, in that family, generation to generation, trying to heal and work out that paragenetic karma. And so they, you know, invoked the Archangel Michael and said, you know, are you willing to have this be dissolved forever? And healing took place, and they had to leave later that day. They came back 10 days later, and there's the father and the son calmly playing chess and chatting with each other. And 400 years of, you know, paragenetic karma on one land was, you know, the time had come for it to be healed.
Yeah.
So anyway, kudos to my friends Ivor and Diane, wherever you are. Anyway, yeah, so it's true. You know, I just thought, well, I'll take time to tell that story. It's a good one.
It is. My goodness, that is a powerful story. And to be able to change something like that so divinely. I mean, yeah, there was a scary moment there, but I mean, everything kind of had to come out in order to be cleared, you know, and it did.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look, on a larger scale of what we're going through now, I like to believe that we're in a similar moment in the human family, that we've been going back and forth, and it's not like we've always been on the light side, I mean, I don't want to look at my past lives, as Swami Suyukteswar said, the past lives of all souls are dark with many shames, and everything in future will improve if you're making a spiritual effort now. That's what matters. And it feels like, what we're doing here with Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening, is doing our best to bring forward this Templar stream of healing and sacred science to really look at ourselves and not just be, we're the white knights and the white horses and coming in to vanquish the evildoers. On a certain level, that's true. But, it's very much about doing our own shadow work and looking at our own issues and our introspection and doing our best to embody what we're supposed to be about.
Exactly. Thoth has said to me recently, because I've been working on my own stuff and, trying to get clearer and everything. And I've been doing this work for so long, this life for so long. And they're this one and the same. And I just want to be clearer. I want to get out some of my own little personal things out of the way so I can just, in this last phase of my life, really, really do put the capstone on the pyramid for myself. So I've been going through that. And Thoth said to me that that souls who come to this planet to both, okay, I have to go back a minute because there's another part to this, and that is I've always kind of poo-pooed, so to speak, when people say, oh, well, I just came here to help this planet. And I'm going, oh, yeah, sure. Nobody just comes here to help this planet. We come here to fix ourselves, and in the process, we help others. And that's true. I still believe that. But Thoth gave me another look at it, to broaden the spectrum a little. That's true because in the sense that all souls, when they enter a magnetic spectrum of this degree, it's a very, I don't want to say dense, intense. It's a very intense magnetic spectrum that we're in here. And when souls come into this spectrum and they don't originate from here. And originate, there's a whole other topic about souls that have actually come up through the nature realm, and they've literally been born in here, and they do a lot better with it. They're not lesser than souls by any means, but they just, this is their native territory, sort of. But souls that don't do that, they're coming in from other star fields and whatever, and there's a lot of those. They have a problem. I mean, when they enter this realm, they feel so torn. And what happens is that it's like taking a wishbone and going, and you're just breaking it apart, and then the marrow's inside. It's like you can't enter this realm without breaking the wishbone. That's what has to happen to get in. The baby crying when it comes out of the womb, it's like it breaks it apart. It has to rent the veil. And when the veil is rented, here you are. And it's true for all souls, but especially those that have come in from other realms, even though they've had other incarnations here, their connection it's still almost a foreign realm to them. So when that wishbone breaks, all of a sudden you're exposed. Parts of the linear reality that you now become a part of. Literally, I don't want to use the word infest, but I can't think of another word right now. Infest you. It just comes into your stream. Now it's part of you. Well, you're going, what the heck here? I was all blissful. I was just doing fine up there. And all of a sudden I come down here and it looks like I've got all this awful stuff in me. And then the soul goes, oh my God, I must be a terrible person, or soul or whatever. And they get very constricted because they thought they were this beautiful light being. And all of a sudden they're in this planet and they're going, oh God, I didn't realize I got to work on this. Boy, I got to work on this. That's where this thing about karma comes up. Because Thoth says really, he talks about karma, but karma, he said, is a manifestation of the soul trying to make something right that's not wrong. And the more they try to make it, the more they try to fix something that ain't broken, the more it really gets broken. Or at least it does in their perspective. So they keep tumbling down that field and then struggling back up and then going down again and climbing back up again. He said karma is a never-ending wheel. Because as long as you believe that you deserve karma, you can't get out of the rabbit hole.
It's funny about that. Karma has become such a common term in the years since, yoga and meditation became really part of life in the West. And ironically, one of the great, pioneers of yoga in the West was Paramahansa Yogananda. And of course, he teaches about reincarnation and karma and the purification of the soul over lifetimes. But he also would say, I'm so tired of hearing Westerners talk about their karma. Deny your karma. God is above karma.
Exactly. I didn't know.
Deny your karma. This is, rise above it. Don't, think, oh, I have this bad karma. Like, no, you are a sovereign being. You are a child of God. You are the immortal, omnipresent, and all-powerful soul. All you have to do is deepen your knowing. And there is, the magic of love that cancels out karma. There's law and there is love, and okay, there's the law and there are consequences. It's cause and effect, and but what you're saying about if you're coming in from elsewhere, and you come down into this very intense field, and the planet has its own karma, and the race has its karma, and suddenly you go, oh, I guess I'm part of this family. I must have done it too, And it really is. You hear these stories about the lords of karma, and that, I don't know if I necessarily buy this whole story, but that on a certain astral realm, there are the so-called lords of karma who will say, oh, so you just left your incarnation and we're reviewing your karmic records, and okay, you need to go back down, and you're going to be over here, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that because we're the lords of karma and we say so. And that actually the lords of karma are self-serving, and they just want souls recycling in their energy field to be able to use them. That's a pretty dark scenario. I really hope it's not true. But gosh, it seems like almost everything in the universe kind of is true. In one timeline or another. What do you get on that?
Well, I haven't given it much thought, but as you're talking about, it's kind of opening the scroll, as Thoth says, to it. And the lords of karma are the aspects of oneself that are recorded in the lower. Well, the lower, he has the lesser akasha and the greater akasha. He talks about, of course. It's more, but it's not either. He's saying this is sort of the narrow band between the lesser akasha and the greater akasha. It's like you got to, you've got the two fields. The lesser akasha is, just everyday stuff and blah, 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 and feeling judgment and feeling guilt and blah, blah, all that down there. And the greater akasha is, I just know. I know the truth. I know I am God. That kind of energy is there. So, but you got a wall. He's talking now to me about a wall that's between the two, or a little field of energy that's kind of a ring pass not, and yet you can pass it, because when you accept that you no longer need the lesser akasha, you're suddenly in the greater, and you go past that wall. But if you're trying to climb the wall, that's that lords of karma, because a soul hits that wall. They come out of body and they go, whoa. My life story, ooh, look what I did there. And, I thought I was doing good there, but boy, was I fooling myself. All of this just It's just there. And the soul goes, oh my God. And then they hit the wall. And when they hit the wall, that's the lords of karma. And that energy field says, okay, I see what you're feeling. You're not able, your vibration matches this part of the wall. It doesn't match what's on the other side because that's where you're focusing. So that's going to send you back to deal with that part again so that maybe next time you won't hit the wall. You'll go over it. And, it's a good idea. But the problem is people don't pick up on that. Souls don't pick up on that very well. They just keep hitting the wall.
Yeah, this really resonates for me because, the Bhagavad Gita says, upon whomsoever one thinks in the moment of death, unto him in truth he goes in accordance with his being.
Ooh, that sounds like it. That sounds like what I just said.
Yeah, it's very true. And that and this is the value, one of the many great values of meditation, which is that, we got our lives to live, bills to pay, families to raise, but if we are able to entrain the soul and the consciousness to focus upon the divine, to focus, whether devotionally or whatever your temperament is, on that divine realm beyond the wall, beyond the lords of karma, that when the moment of death comes, where's your consciousness going to go? Because people always say, well, life is tough. I try to meditate, but when I die, I'm just going to say, oh, I love God. And, my eyes are going to, you see people in their eyes, they're dying and their eyes go here, or saints are pictured with their eyes here. Well, it's because it's the spiritual eye and on you go. And you're leaving the body. It's like, right, I'll just, well, no, your consciousness at the moment of death is going to go wherever it's always been. If your consciousness has been on making as much money as you can and hang on to it, at the moment of death, you're going to go, oh my God, I'm losing all my money. And will my wife have any? And that's where that's your consciousness. Or, if your consciousness was on, I spent all my time at the mall and now I can't go to the mall anymore, you're probably going to be ending up being a discarnate entity hanging around the gosh dang mall, which is so depressing.
Well, for me, it's going to be, oh my God, my hair's a mess.
My hair's a mess. Yeah. But if, on the other hand, and I had a demonstration of this. I went to India. We were on our way up into the mountains, and we had a really reckless driver. Well, he wasn't that reckless. A big bus full of American, pilgrims. And the tour director said to us, everybody, don't worry. This man at the driver's seat, he is our safest and fastest driver. Safest and fastest. Wow. And man, you go around those mountain road turns, and the road isn't wide enough for one bus, let alone two. And here comes another bus. And the two bus drivers, no, I'm the safest, fastest driver. No, I am. And I'm going to play chicken with you. And, and all of us are going, oh my God. And it's like, here I come, Lord, and the soul is going, here I come. It's 25 times in 45 minutes. I literally was doing here I come, Lord, I'm ready to leave the body because, and they say, don't worry, everything will be fine. There's no problem. They're very safe. But then you don't look down into the bottom of the ravine where the rusted hulks of burned out buses down there. You don't want to look down there, right? Anyway.
I had a friend in India. She had one of those bus rides, and she lived to tell about it, but it was pretty scary.
Yeah, it's scary stuff anyway, so that, so upon whomsoever one thinks in the moment of death, unto him in truth he goes in accordance with his being, right? So, this feels like what you're describing, that, that's the value. And in the bigger picture, again, I try to draw it back to what are we talking about here with where we are right now, with ascension, with the world crisis, with the bug and all that. If we are able, in the collective consciousness of humanity, to just get enough of us to focus beyond the wall, we'll have a breakthrough. I mean, yes. I know that's what you have referred to as, what's the key to what this ascension phenomenon is about? Well, it's heart activation. Yes. And you don't have to take some online course with some, Ascension Academy, pay $300 and I'll take you through the Ascension Academy, and on you go when, we transmute into the new earth or something. You just have to be a good, loving, kind person.
Yeah, yeah.
Not buying into fear, and communing with spirit as best you can, and that there is a critical number of activated hearts on the planet, right? Do you want
Heart
to
active.
a little bit?
We're not going anywhere until a certain number of people on the planet receive, get their own heart activation, and that will trigger the energies. But quite frankly, nobody's going anywhere unless they have that heart activation first. And that's not about becoming a tall angel. It's just about becoming a real human being,
Yeah.
basically. Thoth is tapping me on the shoulder. He would really like me to get this in before we conclude for today. Not that we're that close to it, but I'd like to slide it in here. And that is about the Templus Saratum and Ruta. And the Ruta being the key, or a real major key to the triggering, bringing the planet back together again from all the fractured timelines, from all the things that we've created in this arena that are not stable, that are dead ends, that are fractured and flawed. All of these threads that are very connected to magnetism, geomagnetic zones, time, because time is a magnetic anomaly. And we need to sort through all of this in order to make the leap from World System 1 to World System 2. And in fact, we need to sort it through before we can even get on the in-between platform, which is not leaving this planet, but merely a vibrational state of this planet that allows us to have more direction and conscious participation with the ultra beings and the inner earthers and all of that to help us through that. So, and Thoth calls that the Pyramidus Radius. But even before we get really in that, we have to sort through a lot of these other fields. And this brings us to Ruta. And Ruta was originally a province, I guess you could say, of Atlantis. But as time progressed and Atlantis became more and more into its karmic cups, so to speak, the souls that were the enlightened ones, that were the Grail family that had migrated from Lemuria to Atlantis, and not just the Grail family, but others involved with them, they, became more involved in Ruta, in that area. It was like that was the light center. Well, then Atlantis had a cataclysmic oopsie, and a lot of the parts of Atlantis separated, and there was this little island that was Ruta. Now everybody gathered there. That was what was left, So the island of Ruta, and as the island of Ruta grew in light with the Grail families and the attendant energies, then the rest of Atlantis started getting lesser and lesser and lesser. It was like it just seemed to set like two different worlds in a way. So the wise ones of Ruta knew that it was time for the Grail families to migrate, or most of the Grail family peoples to migrate and to leave the whole Atlantean gizmatch, because it was going down at some point. I guess they foresaw what Thoth calls the time tsunami that took it all down. Won't go into detail, but something that Atlantis caused. So they migrated. We told that story before. They went on to the Canary Islands and other places. But Ruta itself, there were certain souls that stayed there, and they knew what was going to happen. They just didn't know when it was going to happen. And when the tsunami hit, the time tsunami, when Atlantis went down, Ruta went up. In other words, it ascended. The whole island of Ruta ascended. Now, this is not the only place on Earth that's ever had that happen. I understand few very, very small areas of the planet have done this before, but Ruta is the key. It's the root. It is the Ruta. It is the key to what caused that tsunami, what broke up those fractions. And indeed, that very tsunami caused what Thoth calls the Kali rift that took us off the Rana time wave and created these fractional lines, which didn't actually affect the planet come together as an effective point of separation until the crucifixion of Yeshua. That's another reason why I said it was so important that Yeshua be crucified, bless his little old heart, and be able to go through the whole experience of transformation and burning through that shroud with light field and be able to do what he did. He literally burned the planet through so that it could continue in a positive direction, despite the fact that that was where the tsunami hit. That was the point. So it all came together. So back to Ruta. So Ruta is now in an ascended state, and it is on the lip of the Eye of Ra. That's the universal tear in Orion. Now you can say, how could Ruta get over here to Orion? We have to leave space aside here. We think of, well, it's way over here, or that's way, way, way over there, or this is right here. You have to take all of that and just push it off the table when you're talking about these things, because it has no bearing on it. It's about synchronization. It's about synergy. It's about vibrational connection. So from that standpoint, Ruta sits on the lip of the Eye of Ra, where the original universal tear was. It's a whole other topic, but it connects to all of this. And so it is at a point where the healing of the universe and the healing of Earth are together. They're working together in a very direct, harmonic way. So now we come to what Thoth calls the Templus Saratum. And these are souls en Ruta. They seem to be the key figures out of the original Grail families, of course. And they work through that Rutan energy to organize and to help all these lines, these fractured lines, heal on the earth and come together, but it's also connecting to the divine, so to the Eye of Ra, which means it's connecting to our original place of origin. The whole universe's origin through this field in the vault of Orion. So it's connected. What heals on earth helps to heal that eye. So at this point, you might say, well, why is Earth so important? Is it true with all these other planets? Every planet that has sentient planet in the universe, or what we call the universe, is important, and it has its role. But Earth has a rather specific role that's very directly related to helping all these other kindred worlds, the worlds that have what Thoth calls humanity, our genetics connected to it, come together to heal this rift. Now, we could go talking about other off-world alien beings and stuff, but we're not going to do that now. They figure in the picture, but it's too big a picture, so we're just going to put them aside. So Ruta, right now and now, here's we sit on this planet, and what we're doing now, the Templus Saratum, the Templars of this higher energy state, they don't live there all the time. For instance, Thoth is one of them. He gets around a lot of places, so he's not just sitting there on Ruta. But these souls work through that platform. And when we're attempting now, so many people are aware now of timelines, of the fact that we're kind of we're on the right timeline, or this is happening or that. They're aware of other dimensions. Even scientists now, a lot of scientists are aware of this. So we have it more in our field to be aware of all of these things. And as this is happening, more awareness is growing. The Templus Saratum and the whole dynamic of Ruta is able to help us connect to the true Rana time wave, which is not a line, it's a harmonic wave, to be able to heal the line we're on and bring it all together. It's a huge topic. I'm not going to go on to all of it anymore, but Thoth wanted me to bring this up because he said, if you're talking about Templars, it's important to understand that all the reason we had Templars, even back in Lemuria, when Melchizedek came to the planet and all of this, it all connects to what is going on now with Ruta holding that connection, holding it in the palm of the hand, saying, it's all right, I've got it, it's right here, I'm holding it for you, while the waters get calm down here, I'm holding the little dove of light, and I'm going to turn it back loose when the moment comes for the light principle 40, and the planet moves into the new heaven and earth. And it's important to know that even though it's a big picture, one can feel it in the heart, and one can call upon that energy and ask to be helpmates to that progress and that field of experience, because a lot of the things that are going on now are related to that.
Okay, let me
virus,
understand. Yeah, excuse me for interrupting. Let me understand. So the Templus Saratum itself, is that a group of Templar souls, or is it a spiritual dynamic and energy that is held in Ruta, or is it both?
It's really kind of both. It's both, because Thoth is one of the souls. There are other souls that aren't as grand as Thoth that are part of the Templus Saratum, like our blue star friend,
Right. So, and how many, was this the 72?
No, I believe he said that the Templus Saratum are only composed of, is it 12 or 13?
Okay. Okay.
But their field stretches far beyond that. So there are other souls just walking around here now, others people, they're very connected to that field of the Templus Saratum.
Right. So your reference to our Blue Star friend, I mean, the name of the channel here is Blue Star Rising,
yeah.
Templar Awakening. So why don't we touch on that a little bit? In fact, hang on, I'm going to get a prop. Don't go away. It'll only take me 10 seconds or less to get this prop, but it's a good one. Hang on.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so this would ordinarily be called a tchotchke or a souvenir or whatever it is. It's a coffee mug. It's a coffee mug.
They're TCB, yeah.
And it says TCB. And it's got a lightning flash. TCB with a bolt of lightning. Now, it's got it on the other side there. And that comes from Memphis, Tennessee. And that's a Elvis Presley memento. And TCB, this is something that Elvis, you'd be in the inner circle if Elvis gave you a TCB pin if you were a man, because it meant you were taking care of business. And so, well, hang on. We're going to cut this part out because I have to let the dog out.
Oh.
Okay. So, taking care of business. And if you're part of the inner circle, Elvis would give you a pin that said taking care of business if you're a man. If you're a woman, it would be TLC, meaning tender, loving care. And but I read a story not too long ago somewhere online in Elvis world, and that's a multifarious universe unto itself right there. Elvis world is that there was a secret second meaning to the TCB, and that it actually stood for an inner secret society that Elvis belonged to, namely Templar Christian Brotherhood, which is a brother sisterhood, as the story goes, of which Elvis Presley was a conscious member and leader, dedicated essentially to the Templar Code, to the upliftment of humanity, to the defense of those who cannot defend themselves, and opposing deliberate evil in the world. Now, I like that story very much. I don't know if it's true, but I do know that Elvis was initiated into a secret society of that kind. Do you want to tell the story of the ring in this regard, or is that? I mean, it's in your book.
Yeah,
let me just let everybody know, because we'll
right,
go right into this, that Reverend Maia has written a remarkable, beautiful book on the soul of Elvis Presley. called Blue Star Love. And I'm sorry, the second, the subtitle's escaping. Blue Star Love.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, come on.
Oh gosh, I just like, because they would not let us put Elvis's name on the cover unless we paid Graceland, I don't know, $20,000. So it's like the mystical and spiritual life of
Right, from an amazing heart of grace.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I never really wanted that title. I mean that subtitle, but I couldn't have Elvis's name in it, so I sort of just chalked it out of my mind.
Right. Okay. Well, let me. I don't know if we have time to go into the full story of your experiences with Elvis, but Maia attended many concerts and developed a special connection with Elvis from the stage. She was able to give him some of her spiritual writings, and she later learned these were very important to him. Of the 1,000 books on metaphysics he ever read, towards the end of his life, he told a friend, "These 22 books are the most important books I ever read." And Maia's book, Red Tree, A Secret History of Lemuria and Atlantis, was one of the books that Elvis most treasured. Yeah. And so they had a strong psychic connection and they communicated telepathically. She had that proven to her from the stage. And so this wonderful book was written based on transcripts of, based in large part on Maia's own work and insights from the Thothip material and her own experiences, but also based very much on recordings of private conversations that Elvis had with Wanda June Hill, who was a close friend of his, discussing these topics that he really couldn't talk about with anybody else, about his spiritual seeking and his spiritual experiences, his memory of past lives, his interest in meditation, and his belief that he was, in fact, his soul origin was the blue star Rigel in the constellation Orion. And so when we're talking about souls who have, come into the planet for a special purpose, and we refer to our friend from the blue star, we're talking about Mr. Presley. So did you want to expand on that, Maia?
Yeah. For one thing, I received from Thoth about Elvis's soul having come from the blue star Rigel before I had any idea that he had actually said that twice to his friend Wanda. And once he said it on tape, and I do have a copy of that tape. But, I didn't know that. And he said that before I even knew about the blue star. It was back in the 60s, and I didn't know about it until the 70s. So when we compared notes, Wanda and I, when she heard me say what I said, she would grab the tapes. Oh my gosh, here it is. So that was the beginning of our communication in a very deep way. And that's when she asked me to write the book. I mean, she knew I was wanting to write a book on Elvis, but she said, "You're the one that should take these transcripts of these recordings about Elvis talking about his spiritual life and beliefs," which he knew she was recording, and to do something with it. So that's how that came about. And I'd been to 37 of Elvis's concerts, beginning in 69 and ending, of course. The last one actually I saw was in 75, and he passed in 77, if you want to call it passed. Anyway, so I had a rich history with him and communicating with him from the stage and all of this. But when I read Wanda's book that she had written, I was just, I loved it. So I knew it was true and it was beautiful. So that's when I contacted her. But we didn't, have a real friendship and communication until she heard what I had to say about the blue star. And that's what sealed it right there.
Right. So that ties in a lot of ways to the work we're doing here, in terms of what Maia shares in the book, what Elvis believed about himself and what he was trying to accomplish as a soul in this life, and what he felt he did not achieve that he was meant to. And maybe you'd want to tell the story of the ring.
Oh yes, the ring. Well, he was, first of all, he was a longtime member and real devotee of Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship. and a good friend of Dayamata, who was then the head of the fellowship that had been turned to her from Yogananda himself. He had asked, she was in line for that from him. And so he was a good friend of hers, and he spent a lot of time up there. And she even let him go to where the monks stayed, a very special place that not a lot of people got to go. So he was already very much on the path. And he had over 1,000 books in his library that were on spiritual metaphysical topics. And he read them, he underlined them, he wrote in the margins, and all of that. And when you go to Graceland, you can see them. Actually, I have a few that he gave Wanda, and Wanda gave to me. But then he came across this other order, not that he was deviating from Yogananda, but, to just add it to his understanding and picture. He joined an order of the order of Melchizedek. Well, there's got to be a zillion orders of Melchizedek out there, so I don't know which one this was, but I do know that Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., if anybody remembers that actor, was a member of it too, because he told Wanda that he was. I guess maybe they were friends. I don't know. Anyway, so he was a member of this other order as well. And the scarves he wore, where he, first of all, he wore the scarves because he knew the monks or whatever, the master monks, whatever, they gave scarves. They blessed them and gave them to people. Well, he wanted to do that too. Not that he thought he was some highfalutin monk or anything, but he just, it appealed to his heart. And if the girls wanted something, well, why not bless these scarves in secret, not tell them? But Charlie told me this, his sidekick that I talked to personally on the phone after Elvis's death. Charlie told me with his own words that Elvis would bless these scarves before the show, give them to Charlie so nobody else touched them. And then Charlie would give him each scarf that he wore a little while. And, after he'd worn it a while, he would give it to a girl. So the girls thought, oh, I'm getting a scarf from Elvis. And actually, they were getting a blessed scarf from Elvis. And this was his, one of the many ways he worked to try to bring his to be a spiritual channel, if you will, for the people that loved him and wanted to touch him and be near him. It's like, okay, this is the life that I've been given. And when he went to a Dayamata and said, why did God make me Elvis Presley? And he never told Charlie the answer to that, what she told him back. But when he wanted to get Kriya Yoga, she said, no, you can't do that, Elvis, because you've got to be Elvis. You've got to be Elvis Presley. You can't go off into, you want to become a monk? And she said, no, you can't do that. You got to be Elvis Presley. So he thought, okay, I've got to be Elvis Presley. So how can I use this medium to reach people spiritually? It was a very, very difficult, it was heartrending for him, as you would hear on the tapes. He says, it's just driving me crazy. It's driving me crazy. He said, I have this hunger. So one of the things he did was bless these scarves. The girls wanted the scarves. Okay, I'll bless them, and then I'll give it to them. So back to the ring, because the scars play into this. So then when he became a member of the Melchizedek order, they wore these scarves. I don't know they wore them everywhere all the time, but part of it, but it wasn't just around, if you'll notice, if you watch it all, in 1972, Elvis started wearing his scarves differently, not on stage, because he had to be able to take them off easily, but off stage he had it sort of like a napkin, and it went over the shoulders, and it had a little, thingamajiggy that tied it right here, so you had this napkin of a scarf. And the reason it changed like that, so Wanda told me, was because of this Melchizedek order. That's the way they wore their scarves. Maybe it was in ceremony or something. And so anyway, the head of this order, the very head of it at the time, I don't know who he was or what, gave Elvis a ring. And this ring was very old and very interesting looking. It was a heavy man's ring and like a seal or something on it. There's a picture in my book. And he said, this is a very, very special ring, and it's very old, and I feel you should have it, Elvis, and I know that, as you work, as you evolve in your spirituality even more and more, this ring will be, you know, very special to you. Well, not long after that, I mean, maybe a year or so, you know, but maybe longer, but Elvis got to the point where he was having so much problems in his life, extreme bad health, from various things that in his life that had caused bad health, not drugs. At first, drugs came, medical drugs came when he was in such horrible pain, and these doctors were giving him stuff indiscriminately, just totally indiscriminately. He had 2 different doctors that didn't know each other that were giving him different things. And my friend Linda, who was the photo girl in Vegas, who knew him as well, I had other sources besides Wanda, was telling me, she said, this is insane. He's got this Arabian doctor, or you know, Middle Eastern doctor in Vegas, and he's got Dr. Nick back in Memphis, and Dr. Nick traveled with him too, but somehow for a while he wasn't. So they were giving him, you know, conflicting medication. Anyway, he had that going on. He was very, very ill, and he also had other situations in his life that were really not of his making. Of course, everyone has their karma. I understand that. So I'm not saying he was innocent totally, but you know, he was a famous person, and he was being taken advantage of by many people very close to him. And this hurt his heart because he was such a loving person. And then when certain people in his experience that were close to him said, what this order you belong to? You can't even, you know, and you think you're going to help people spiritually? How can you help people spiritually? You can't even help yourself. He was getting this a lot. And he finally just said to Wanda, he said, I felt I don't deserve this anymore. I'm going to drop, you know, he didn't quit the Yogananda order, but he did quit the Melchizedek one. He said, because I can't live up to what they want from me, and I'm just not deserving. So he went to the head of the place, and he took the ring off, and he said, here, you know, I don't deserve this ring. I want you to take it back because I'm just not, you know, I'm not living up to it, and I just want you to take it back. And he said, no, Elvis, no. This ring is yours. So Elvis took it back. Now, I interpret that to mean that the original owner of the ring had been an incarnation of Elvis. Now, that's my interpretation, mine and Thos. But the man just simply said, this ring is yours. So Elvis kept it, but he wouldn't wear it anymore. And at the very last one, he saw Wanda the last time, which was just months before his death. They were alone together. He'd come to do an interview she was going to interview him on tape for a young man who was going to college. He had all these phone friends, okay, and they had family, and they had kids, and they had this and that. And this young man was part of this family, and he was doing his thesis on Elvis. And he asked Wanda if she would ask him if he would do a little, you know, some tapes that give him some, you know, some feedback. I don't think he was going to use them publicly. I'm not sure if he did or not, but he wanted, you know, this. And Elvis said yes. Here he was, this sick person with all these problems and everything, but he met Wanda in a Memphis motel to be able to do this. He didn't want to be at home with all those prying eyes, so he had special people, special friends that took him there. So they did this interview there, just across the table from one another. And when it was through, and he got up to leave, you know, he gave her this big hug. She said it just brought tears to her eyes. She felt he was saying goodbye, like she'd never see him again. And he took the ring off and just put it, he was wearing it at that time, and just put it right in her hand like that. She didn't know what to put in her hand. He just went like that and put it in her hand. And when he left, she opened her hand, and it was that ring. And of course, she knew what the ring was. Oh, I have to say he did tell her, because he put it in her hand and he said, I'm sorry, he did say, he said, I want you to have this because it's not valuable monetarily. And when I'm gone, they're going to go through my things, and they're going to decide that this ring isn't worth anything, and they're just going to throw it away. So I want you to have it. So that's how she got the ring.
So the rest of the story I'm receiving, you don't particularly want to cover right this second?
What's the rest of the story?
Well, what became of the ring?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of, I don't feel that it's appropriate.
Okay,
Uh,
I understand.
but it's in good hands.
Yes, we'll just let everybody know that we know what happened to it, and it's in good hands. Shall we leave it at that?
That's right. Yes.
Right.
Exactly. What I really am hoping we'll do, Michael, another show, dedicate the whole show to this topic because it's very rich and it goes on, and there's a lot of things I think people would like to hear. So we're just
Yeah,
skimming.
and you know what? I will just mention in passing. Of course, we've shared it elsewhere that there is a documentary in the works of Maia's book, and I can just share with everybody that it's going well, and we look forward some months down the road to being able to share it with you. So as I'm looking at where we are time-wise, it's 5 o'clock. Yeah, we probably need to be wrapping up. And yes, there is incredibly rich material that we've only touched on. And I think this Templar thread, it touches on Elvis, it touches on the Blue Star, it touches on the work we're doing with sacred science, and it touches on what we're all going through with the lockdown, the agendas behind it, upholding divine justice. And so this feels like a thread. I mean, there's a reason that the channel here is called Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening. So the Holy Grail, the nature of this valley that we're sitting in as we share this interview with you, there is many a rich story waiting to be told about the high energetics of this valley and how we have been blessed to be able to learn how to work with them. So thank you, Maia, for again, sharing all your beautiful receivings with us, and we'll say hello to Nemo, who's directly behind your right shoulder, right?
Yes, it's kind of hard to see because he blends in.
Right, he blends. There he is. What a cute! He blends in with the fireplace.
There we are.
Right, he's your secret blessing there. All right, thanks everybody. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.